I'm so proud of myself because I usually press recording after about 3 or 4 minutes and then interrupt someone in full flow. So, welcome everyone. It's fantastic that we've got so many people here from all across the globe because I can see the faces and names, and really interesting. We had almost 200 register for this session, so clearly it's something that people are interested in. So we're going to get straight into it. This came about by I started reading more and got more interested and recently coached an NGO team who were bored. And so in that way, I got together with David and Arn and Dummy, and we all thought, yes, there's not a lot out in terms of board coaching. And so this session is one of a number that are coming up, and then there'll be workshops, but also even a retreat down the line. So watch this space in terms of development for coaches. And I know also we've got some people from organizations who are also on the call as well. So we will be addressing as well that side of things just a little bit, but more of that to come on future sessions, the way that, L&D, OD, etc., can support the development of boards as well. And with so much going on in our world, I almost want to pause and breathe after saying that. And with AI disruption and with climate issues, uncertainty, and seems to be even more complexity every year, things are heavier for boards than potentially they used to be. And so sometimes boards are working in murky waters and sometimes the total unknown. So we believe that the role of coaching for boards is something that is going to be even more needed over time. So that's how this happened. We got together, had a chat, came up with this session. The fantastic Sarah Corner is facilitating this session. She works closely with me. And I'm going to hand over to you, Sarah, and thank you.
Oh, thank you, Claire. Thank you indeed. And hello to everybody. I'm just looking in the chat and we've got people from Bahrain, France, Albania, some friends I remember from Doha, Vancouver, beautiful Vancouver. So welcome all. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Sarah. I'm coming to you from a very, very overcast Cardiff in South Wales, but I'll be a moderator today for this enlightening panel on board coaching. So this is the first of a series with workshops and development sessions to come for coaches, L&D, OD and HR professionals. But no matter what your role, whether you're a coach, a board member or a business professional, our goal today is to enhance your understanding of board coaching. So we're going to explore its unique benefits, how it differs from other forms of leadership development, and you'll also gain practical knowledge and tools and techniques used in board coaching, along with an awareness of common challenges and strategies to overcome them. We'll also look at how board coaching can foster ethical considerations and, time permitting, because, oh yes, it's jam-packed, we'll conclude with a discussion on emerging trends. So before we dive in, just a couple of housekeeping notes. So we've got about 5 questions. We're aiming for about 15 minutes per question with a Q&A for 15 minutes at the end. So please feel free to use the chat function. Don't worry, because everything today is recorded, so you can revisit our chat at any time over a cup of tea or coffee. And just a little disclaimer to keep things clear. All views expressed by our panelists today are their own and do not represent any organisation. So let's kick things off with a round of introductions. I'd love for each of our panelists, and that's Claire, David, Arn and Dumi, to tell us a little bit about themselves. So what's your background? What secret ingredient or expertise do you bring to board coaching? And what made you jump into this fascinating field? So let's start with David, then we'll move to Claire, Dummy, and Arne. Hi, David, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. I, I, my experience of all of this work has come through facilitation originally, and I think for most people who've been, most boards have experienced facilitation for a lot longer than they have coaching, and many facilitators have then graduated to being coaches because they've seen that being a coach adds more value. So part of the background of this was working with the UK Health Service, developing programs for people, for new directors, for example, and the National School of Government in the UK, doing research with them and leading on some of their new director programs. How do you actually join a board and become effective? So we can think about boardroom coaching as partly coaching individuals, but also coaching the collective. Um, and so the, for the individual, one of the interesting things that has emerged is the aspiring director mentoring type program. Or whether we call it coaching or mentoring at this stage, we don't really care. It's basically, but the role of helping somebody who has been there and seen it and done it, helping them to understand the transition. And we have a program. We launched the 12th cohort this week for the CIPD in the UK, the Personnel and Development. And in that program, we basically are putting particularly people from minority backgrounds, but these are people within a couple of years or perhaps potentially becoming HR directors with experienced HR directors. And we've done some research around this whole area, looking at the transition. What do you wish you knew when you were trying to become an HR director, or that you know now? And lots of things, apart from one guy who said, "Don't do it." But the majority of things, don't expect to be welcomed at the top table or treated as an equal. You've got to prove that you're worth, and so forth. So there's a lot of work here for coaches, working with people, helping them to make that transition to the board. But once they get to the board, how do they, as individuals, make an impact, and collectively, how do they behave to have the biggest possible impact on the company or the organization? And we could go into whether the board is a team at great length, and I'm going to leave that for my colleagues to go into. But clearly there's lots of potential around the boardroom table for significant improvements. It's no coincidence that board can be spelled BOARD and BORED. So I'm going to pass on to Claire at that point.
Yeah, on that note, that's brilliant. I love that. Yes, Claire, over to you, please.
Thank you. Love that, Dave. So I started out originally as a teacher and then MBA lecturer, then coaching internally and also externally for organizations. What got me into board coaching was coaching NGOs, and also predominantly in Bahrain initially, and then across the Middle East, coaching family businesses. And sometimes when we think of family businesses, we think, oh, family businesses. These are the sort of ultra high net worth global, they're billionaires in their own rights type of thing, family businesses. And many of them moving into their third, fourth generations, and all the complexities that brings. And sometimes the young people in the organization moving up to director and realizing, I don't want to be in this family business anymore, whilst the first generation are there and it's their baby. So some of the big pieces there were things like bringing in non-executive directors and the work around that to still enable trust in the boardroom. And so one of the reasons I love this work is because I love coaching, coming from an education background, having more people in the room, but also the challenges of it. And it also makes me carry on reading and carry on learning. In fact, there was 2 books I just shared with Sarah before the call, and keeping abreast of what's happening in the different fields of the boards that I'm working in, but also that piece around, and we'll talk more of this later, even transpersonal coaching, what's needed for our world. So the ecosystemic and also the relational aspects of boards working together in service of what needs to shift for the world. Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, and over to you, Demi.
Wow. I'm looking at over 83 people here. I want to start by saying to you, Claire, thank you, and Sarah, thank you. David, we are starting this, initiating this, but I think there's a collective, very interesting interest in this. So to every one of you that are here now, hello and greetings, and thank you for being here. This shows just an interest. I'm seeing a number of friends here, colleagues and counterparts. I see Craig, Andrew, Jonathan, Jean-Hervé, Lisejo. I can go on and on and on, like good old friends and mates of us here. And many of you that we haven't met, hello, greetings, it's good to connect. So that's my grandfather who taught me, you do not meet people and not greet and just shoot straight into what it's about. You don't do that. Say hello, connect, and greet. So I'm starting with that. And in my language, Sani Bonani, I'm going to put it in the chat. Anyone who understands, who can write that, please write it in the chat and write what it means. Sani Bonani, it means I see you. Literally means I see you in plural. So I see more than you are. More than you are showing on a rectangular screen. I see more of you as you represent all that you bring to this space now. But try and saying that to board chairpersons and board members or directors of companies. They sing numbers and they sing other things that do that. So for me, I want to start by saying that in this space we're gathered in today is incredible potential for us to support shifts in organizations that we work with. And the first thing is really demystifying what board or directorship is. I like what David said around really understanding that there's mentoring that happens and the others that are preparing themselves for those leadership roles. So by way of introduction, Sarah, I want to say we need to rehumanize these hallowed halls or boardrooms where people sit and make decisions. And that, yeah, we want to make them special and pedestal them up there. It's important to know that they carry a responsibility for the organization's oversight in that. And one of the key things I've seen, having served on boards for a number of years now, and been working with board members and mentoring and coaching others in that we need to understand what Clay is talking about, the systemic nature of the ecosystem where boards exist. What I've seen is that sometimes they get disconnected from that. They become too strategic and removed from what's going on in the business. And when you work with them in a coaching role or capacity, sometimes it's to reconnect those dots, not to pull them back into operational stuff, just staying in their lane and knowing what they need to do and what speed to drive it, not to pull executives and people that they work with out of their roles in that. So I'm fascinated by what this platform can do. So Sarah, I want you to stop there and say, rehumanizing boards is an interesting part for me to say, how do we help board representatives or directors of companies become agents of organizational transformation at strategic level?
Thank you very much, Dummy. My goodness, you've given me some thinking to do there. I love the hallowed halls of the boardroom. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll get into some really healthy debate here by the sounds of it, which is great. So last but not least, Arne, over to you from the lovely Canada. So what's your background and your expertise in board coaching?
Well, like Dumi, I would like to echo the welcome, and it's really somewhat overwhelming to have 87 of you looking at us intently to talk about this subject, because it is emerging, it is new, and it does require, I think, a new way of working with boards and helping boards, supporting boards to work better together. I come by, say, board coaching in a different way. I started in 2010 working in the Middle East. I was the governance and assurance advisor to the chairman of the board of a very large national oil company. And I worked with 39 boards and 39 executive teams. And I was thrown in on the deep end. I thought I knew what I was doing. First, I made lots of mistakes. And one of them was thinking about an executive team in the same way, approaching them in the same way that I did the board. And that was quite a education for me. And, you know, with coaches, advisors, mentors, even supervisors, we're often engaged in helping leaders and teams enhance their effectiveness, resolve conflicts, navigate complexity. But working with a board introduces additional layers of complexity and dynamics, like there's governance, power structures, fiduciary responsibilities, a mix of executive and non-executive voices on the board. There's also shareholder, you know, if you're with a publicly traded board, you know, who's got more power because of the amount of shares or number of shares they hold and they represent. So it's a different mix, and I'm looking forward to enhancing the practice and grateful for the opportunity to work and learn from you all to see how we can make this better, because I agree with Dumi, I agree with Claire, that and David as well, that we, you know, the world deserves better. We have to rehumanize the way boards look at. And the thing that drove me to improve boards was, I remember once I was in an industrial city in this country. There was an employee who had his hands duct taped to a broom and was using the broom. And I thought, oh my God, what's going on? So I went, found the supervisor, and through, you know, following it all the way up to the chain of command to the board had said that they didn't want any environmental health or safety issues that were not, death experiences reported. So that's the kind of rehumanizing. It's like the board is responsible for the behavior of the organization, and ultimately to make the workplace better, the boards need to be better. They need to take their minds off and their faces, their mindsets off of profit and loss. That is important, but there's other considerations as stakeholders that they need to be aware of: the impact on culture, the impact on health, safety, and environment. So that's where I come from. I have a very pragmatic view of board governance and working with boards, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to work with David, Claire, and Dumi to expand my horizon, but then also to share and get feedback from you, our audience, on what your observations are, because that's, I think, how we will become better, is by creating a community to foster better governance and better board oversight. So thank you, Sarah.
Oh, thanks, Arne, and thank you all panelists. Got a rich tapestry of experience here, so it promises to be jam-packed. So let's unpack what board coaching is and what it really entails, and why it's not just your run-of-the-mill leadership coaching. So we have 2 slides to show you on types of boards, and there they are. They should be up on your screens now. And obviously there are more types of boards. So my first question is to you, David. Yeah. Could you share your understanding of board coaching and how you believe it contributes to the overall effectiveness and governance of a board? please share examples, history, short anecdotes from your experience.
Okay. Again, I'll try and keep it short because I think there's a lot to be said here. But the ultimate point of board coaching is to help the board align with its purpose. Or if you put it another way, align its purpose with what the organization is there for. And so it's all about purpose. Why is the organization here? How does it serve society? And then why are we here? And what is our role in supporting the organization in doing that? And that's that very simple level. That's what boards are for. And it's very easy to lose touch with that. I remember being on one board for a an international children's charity, and pointing out that everybody around the table was at least in their 50s, and many of them much older, and they were all white. They were all from the same background, and just saying, well, where's the voice of the people that you're trying to support? And the board was not connected. It's rather like I always have in my mind that the figure of the headless ghost, the one that walks around, he's had his head chopped off and he walks around with his head tucked under his arm. And so many boards are like that, especially if they're only meeting once a month, for example. The trouble is that the world is moving so fast that they have no chance of keeping up with what's going on. So one of the big challenges, I think, for the boards and therefore for coaches to help them with, is how do you actually really remain connected with the organization? And if you put that in the historical context of the rise and fall of civilizations, an organization is a mini civilization. Civilizations collapse simultaneously from the outside and from the middle. They become divorced from the middle gets divorced from what's happening at the edges, and it's at the edges that changes come out. The barbarians come in and eventually sweep in and conquer. The metaphor, I think, is quite a useful one in thinking about how do boards actually ensure that they are sufficiently connected with what's happening in the outside world to be able for the organization to remain connected. And that's a challenge.
And Claire, my question is coming to you next. And if you can put the poll up as well, whether people do coach teams or have you ever coached a board. How does coaching at board level differ from executive leadership, team and group coaching?
Quite often, boards operate as groups as opposed to teams, and it's one thing to consider, is that okay? Is that working? And team coaches can enable them to function as a true team. The other thing is, obviously, there's a lot more complexity. One thing that's always evident is because they're not working together daily and they're meeting every so often, then the logistics is something that always comes to supervision when people are coaching boards, because getting them all together and getting the amount of time you need them all together can be really, on a practical level, quite tricky. I think the other thing, the difference between coaching teams and boards is when people come with a certain hat on, instead of ditching their normal hats and coming as a board member in terms of the brief that they were effectively hired for in that particular role. So going back to basics sometimes and looking at why are we here? What do each of us need to do in service of the board as a collective? Looking outside at the stakeholders' needs and how they're addressed. This is almost even more important at board level. And then things like their reputation with social media, the changes in AI, so much more, you know, governance requirements and regulation. All those things are at that level and not necessarily relevant to team coaching at other levels in the organization.
And Demi, what distinct value do you think board coaching brings compared to other forms of leadership development?
You mean besides making sure that the company doesn't sink? Yeah.
That's right.
I think it's a very important question, that one, Sarah, on the distinct value to me for boards compared to, say, executive excos. I coach excos and mancos and that. For a board, especially one that is clear on what its role is as an oversight body, a governance, providing oversight and leadership for a business. The distinct value for board coaching is staying alert and aware to that role that they're there to play, and making sure that board members understand that they need to provide that leadership and oversight to a business beyond the role that an executive team does. An executive team is charged with delivering on, say, on the strategy and the key performance indicators, and then the board, it holds them to account to that, to make sure that the board understands what it's there to do. For me, one distinct value is reminders for the board by team coaches or board coaches specifically, that you're not here to run the business, but you're here to provide oversight. You're providing that governance oversight, that leadership, that the vision stays there, that this is what we're here to do. What we see with some boards is that they blur the lines between executives and boards, and they take on some of those functions. And especially if they don't have a strategic impact plan for the board or KPIs for the board, that this is what the board is supposed to do. You're measured as a board on this. Very, very important. The executive team need to have their own measures, indices that will say this is what you're supposed to do, and then they report to the board. The board, who holds the board to account? The shareholders, maybe others, depending on what type of board it is. Very important if you're coaching a board to hold them to that, hold their hand to the fire of oversight. Say that again. Part of board coaching is to be able to hold the board's hand to the fire of their governance oversight. If you don't do that, you're falling short as a board coach yourself. And David mentioned mentoring, that it's not that you don't mentor, you can prepare them, you can be specific that this is what you're doing, but you want to have value as an external intervener in that system at board level, where directors understand that they have someone who will hold them to stay honest on what it is that they do. And this is why we need to be aware that you're partnering with the board to bring to bear their skills of governance oversight in managing, navigating those choppy economic, financial responsibilities of oversight for a business. And very important for the ethical ground, the ethical bone of the coach and the board members to always be held up to them to say, are you staying in your lane as a board? So I'll leave it at that. There's a whole lot more to this around the distinct value and the difference with executives. Sarah?
Thanks, Demi. There's a lot of interesting things coming up on the chat. Andrew Pryor mentioning the board conflict going on currently with Prince Harry. And also there's an interesting question here. I wonder if I could throw it to the panel, maybe to you, Arne. So from Svetlana, who typically hires the board coach or influences the hiring decision? Is it shareholders, the chair, the board, the executive team?
In my experience, it's usually been the board chairperson who is responsible for bringing someone in because they recognize they need assistance. And it's usually after a board crisis leadership crisis or something's happened in the business. It could be that the board has had a great deal of turnover and they want to align everyone on the purpose, make sure that they, that how they think and interact and make decisions in a complex environment of the board is like aligned. And sometimes there are boards who are just tired of being board members and they want to refresh. They want to be challenged. So usually it's the board chair and the vice chairs who I speak with, then do a discovery session with the directors, and then go back to the chair and say, "Yep, I think confirm, validate what their concerns are, and bring new ones up as well, so that they may not be aware of." When I do that, I usually use Chatham House rules, so that it's clear that we can bring up issues, but no one will be quoted specifically, so there's anonymity.
Yeah.
Because I'm working with the board right now, which they find the board meetings just dreadfully boring, and they don't want to say that to the chairperson because they really like her. So I'm the bearer of bad news, and I think we also can act as the pressure relief valve, allow them to give voice to their concerns and know that it'll go back, but in a way that's framed as a suggestion for enhancement and a discussion, as opposed to which a lot of board effectiveness initiatives are usually check the box. Do you show up to all the meetings? Yes, check. Do you give good input? Check. That's really for regulators, and that's one thing to keep in mind. A board is always looking at their fiduciary responsibilities, responsibility to the business, their reputation, the reputation of the board, So, I know I've expanded a bit, but that is, the role of the team coach / advisor mentor is to work with the chairperson, because they usually are the ones that drive the direction of the engagement.
And just continuing with that, Arne, like some skeptics question like the effectiveness of board coaching. So, believing that the time and investment required for board coaching, it doesn't always yield like measurable and immediate returns. And, especially that immediate word. What do you think about that? Do you think that board coaching is crucial in today's business environment?
That's a tricky one, because it depends on, again, everything. I sound like a management consultant. It depends. But if is the board in crisis, and is the board taking a long-term view? They will drive it. But if they're in crisis, you need to intervene quickly and work with them quickly. And keep in mind, most board members will serve, for a long time. 3 to 6 years. So taking a long-term perspective as well, and then formulating it as a, let's say, professional enhancement program will also help sell it. But usually, in my experience, it's entirely dependent on what the board needs, where they're at, and what they've identified for in terms of the intervention that they need to make them better. So.
Thanks.
Answer.
No. I saw you smiling then, David. Do you have anything else to add?
I think there's something here about in a team, you choose people who are going to be able to work alongside each other. In a board, you choose people who come with specific expertise or perspectives that they can bring, and you're not really looking at how well they're going to work together. You just assume that they're mature enough to be able to do that, and it's not the case very often. So I think a coach can really add some value by helping the board see itself, holding up the mirror to it, and sometimes that message just isn't welcome. I remember being asked to go and observe a board meeting in the health industry, and the powers that be above were concerned because they got ambitions about becoming, about taking on what was then trust status, and so they were going to take more responsibility for their own destiny. And just sitting into this board meeting and seeing the chairwoman, basically she'd got so many minutes I already identified for each discussion. And there wasn't really much discussion at all. But we got to the end of the 3.5 minutes that she got, and she says, right, now moving on. And you thought, what was the point of these people being here? And she was so formidable that nobody stood up and said, hang on a minute. And so the whole, 6 months later, they dissolved the whole board. And sometimes I observe that we get brought in as coaches in the same way that sometimes people bring in an individual coach to work with a problem employee. That we're there basically, we've been called in by whoever, the shareholder, the chairman or whatever, and we're a sort of last ditch defense for, can anybody do anything with this bunch, or do we need to line them all up and shoot them?
This is leading into our second topic quite well, actually. What are the common challenges you encounter when coaching board members, especially in diverse and multi-generational boards? And, how can you overcome that? And to our audience as well, your experiences are just as valuable. So please share in the chat any challenges you faced while working with boards, and indeed any solutions. So if we can carry on with you at the moment, David, and then we'll go on to Dummy and Arne and Claire with this question.
Okay, so I was so I missed the question. I mean,
that's right. Just the common challenges you encounter.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. I have that effect on people.
No, it's called old age and senility. But I think a lot of the challenges are remaining relevant. That's, for me, is the biggest challenge of all. What are we here for? How do we actually have an impact on the organization? And I think there is an increasing argument for saying that boards as we now know them are obsolete structures. And that's quite a strong statement. But when you think that the word board, and therefore the notion of a board, goes back hundreds of years to about, we first see it about 800 AD. So we're in, and the board was there to advise the king. So the chair was where the king sat, or the throne, at the one end of a long table. And then so you advised, and the king took decisions. So we're still using a lot of the assumptions about how you have good governance of an organization based on that very obsolete way of running a kingdom or an organization. It doesn't matter what it is, but is it actually fit for purpose now? And we can bring in all the things about fast-moving technology. We can all sorts of things we can pile into that discussion. But the basic question, what does a fit-for-purpose board look like in the modern world? And we can tack into that things like sustainability and the good ancestor. The decisions that you make, what will your grandchildren think about those? When they're your age, or your grandchildren's children. These kind of questions, I think, are becoming much more fundamental for a board. And we as coaches have the privileged position that we are one of the few people to be able to challenge the board from inside. They allow us into their sanctum to be able to challenge their thinking. They don't really normally let other people do that. And if they become very much sort of, groupthink takes hold, they've got a strategy, they're going to pursue it. There's no real attempt to think, could that strategy be completely wrong? So all of those things, we're there we have a role in really shaking up their thinking, and it may not be comfortable. So sometimes, as an example I gave before, we get fired pretty quickly. And in fact, being a team when we're a coach, we should be expected to be fired any day. If we're for challenging people. When we're a boardroom coach, we should be expected to be fired every time we meet them.
The same question to you, Dummy. What challenges do you encounter when you're coaching board members?
For me, one of the things is look around this room right now. Right now, look around this screen and scroll across to see the screen. Then tell me how many people are below 30 right here, right now. And in a world of technology, nothing. I mean, I love elders. We are all in my culture, Zulu. The elders are venerated as full of wisdom, but not all people are wise. And boards are full of old people. Most boards now getting younger and younger and younger. Did I say I'm going to be controversial? I didn't warn you. No, I didn't. Okay, that's fine. We need to understand the world we're in now with technology and digital age. We need to play the game and understand that. One of the biggest challenges I've seen with boards, those that I've worked with, is turning too slowly like a big tanker, like a big train off tracks. Boards need to adjust quickly to change, especially now with digital age, as they call it, technologies, and that with board members that say, no, we've done this, we've won with this, and this worked. You're going to play and catch up very fast. So if you're a coach working with a board like that, what's your focus on that? You don't have to say people have, their terms are coming to an end 2, 3, 4, 5 years time. They need, what do you say as a coach? Dude, you're too old, leave. No, there's got to be a way to do that. So the challenges of the challenge broadly, really, it's adaptation. There's communication, there's conflict resolution, and there is a big part that I've seen, Sarah, in some boards is playing nice, and how to overcome that and not just be pacified. A board where you can hold each other to account, not just as board members, but with the executive that you're working with, and some shareholder representatives, if you have such an arrangement, and then bringing in younger people on the board, or being consultative enough to engage with different parts of the organization where they can be brought in to present to board what's going on, so that board have sight of what's going on, not to get into the weeds of running a business, but to remain freshly aware of what's going on in the business. And some of those lines are getting blurry now more than ever with technology, with AI and that. And that's a big challenge right now for many boards, Sarah, that others are saying, oh, because some board members are already aware what's in the report before it's presented. So what happened there? Transparency issues and that communication issue and the conflict. And keeping the lines clear what a board is. And David is right. Sometimes we need to start thinking, do we need a board here or something else? What will be replacing, what will replace boards when boards become redundant, which many of them are anyway? Yeah.
And Anne, what's your contributions to this? There's a lot of people in the chat as well asking how many times, David, you've been fired as a board coach.
One of the things that strikes me about board members, directors, chairpersons, is that they are not very courageous, and they really like doing what was done in the past in order to not upset the apple cart or rock the boat. And as a coach, mentor, advisor, what I think the role of a coach is to help them tap into their courage and help them feel comfortable asking questions and taking action, because that is ultimately what a director can do. They can do anything. They are empowered to do that. And I think that's part of the challenge with refreshing boards, is helping them tap back into the non-deferential sort of asking questions. And that's where also I think it's coaching skills come in to help establish psychological safety. And in this case, psychological safety is not about your comfort or their comfort. It's about, do they feel comfortable bringing up those issues that need to be discussed in a way that everyone has a voice at the table and everyone can contribute? Because in my mind, a board is about facilitating good decisions that are in alignment with their purpose. So when I hear what David and Dumi have said, it's like, yeah, all of those are correct. But I also think we boards are behaving in a way that that somehow there's an expectation that with this noble, this noble sort of position that I have, I need to be very calm and easygoing, and not necessarily. I think boards need to challenge one another, and that's where a coach comes in to help them challenge, to help them explore those ideas, and separate the person from the issues so that they make the decision that's best for the organization, because that's what they're there for. So I find this, in a way, that's what we're there for, is to help them rediscover their courage, their ability to speak, and their ability to act.
I could continue with you on. So Jonathan from New York is asking on the chat, so how often do you run into issues related to friends of the CEO on the board?
Yes, absolutely.
Or Claire, you can carry on with this one, no problem.
So that type of thing, the colluding together, people brought on boards because they know someone, all of that is, I can't even get my words out, just happening so often. And it doesn't talk to diversity. I could spend an hour on diversity, and I won't, but even having people on the board that are neurodiverse to bring in different perspectives. And some of the other things that have shown up in the work I've been doing with boards are, when a board's looking backwards, they're not even looking at the here and now or looking at what's needed for the future. And then if the board works insular and they're not hearing what's happening out there. So I know David's got one and we've got one. Profiles 360 on the board itself, the whole board, to hear at the start of a coaching engagement, that data is really useful. And then also sometimes boards being scared of success, over optimistic, and also, I think it's been mentioned already, not being able to critique each other. And then a massive one, which can be supported by team coaches observing them in their business as usual, when they don't listen to each other, or it's lip service to listening. I think that was quite a list, wasn't it?
Can I just come in there and say, there's a particular situation which we meet quite frequently, and that is where you've got a founder company, and they can be quite large companies doing this, and the next generation is taking over, but the board is packed with dad's old mates, and that's a poisonous mixture. And I've encountered this in the UK, I've encountered it in Italy, a number of other places. And it takes a lot of delicate work coaching the CEO as well as the family members, and just coaching the whole system, basically. And ultimately, the CEO has got to be able to exert his or her authority. But it's tough because the board is actually now a drain on resources, a drain on innovation. This is a frequently occurring situation, and there isn't really a nice, easy way of dealing with it. It's always messy.
Thank you, David. And I know I'm going to just move us on a little bit and shift our focus towards the fundamental aspect of board coaching. So one that underpins like all we do in this field. So let's explore how ethical considerations are integrated into board coaching. So my next question for the panel to consider is, how can board coaching influence the board as an entity to prioritize ethical considerations and societal impacts alongside financial outcomes? Claire or David, as soon as you're in there, would you like to answer that question for us first? Did you put me on mute again, David?
There we are. I put myself on mute, and I'm typing a response in the chat again to some of the things to it. So I've done it again. I've been focusing on doing the on answering the response in the chat. So go ahead.
Do you want to ask? Yeah. So how can board coaching influence the board as an entity to prioritize ethical considerations and societal impacts alongside financial outcomes?
I think this is where we have to have our systemic hat on, our complex adaptive systems hat on. Yeah, where does the board and the organization sit in the environment that it's a part of? So how is it influenced by that environment, and how does it influence back? And so certainly I'm finding that as at all levels in organizations, including the board, we're starting to look at the system. And how is that system sustainable? What's happening in the outside world that could act in those systems, which could actually undermine the board and the organization? What can the board do to link other players in the system to make the whole system work better? And I think that last question is the fundamental one. This is now looking beyond the idea that the board is there to direct the organization. The board is there to position the organization in a fluctuating environment and to help the board basically float within that environment rather than sink.
And over to you, Claire.
Slightly different angle on this. So yes, of course, risk is important to look at. Yes, ethics, but also things like health and wellness and resilience of the board, the people there, but also the organization. And for me, even bringing in things like empathy. What way can they have compassion for all the different parts of the system that they're there to serve?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in there, Sarah. Thank you. I like what you were saying there, David, and what you just touched on now, Sarah. For me, this is one of the most important parts, responsibilities of a board. What, as a board, are you modeling? If I'm part of it, what are we modeling for leadership, ethically sound leadership, values-based leadership for a board? And it starts with the chairperson of the board and the rest of it. If you have boards that has committees, say risk committee, finance committee, all that, what are those boards or parts of the board representing? What are they modeling or showing to the rest of the business how to be? Because remember, you are the leadership of the business or the organization, and you are, whether you like it or not, under the spotlight. The rest of the staff of that organization are aware of what you do and they see you. So ethics, David spoke about having the all piles of, if in the founder situation, all piles of your dad or granddad that are sitting on the board. If board appointments are not done properly or ethically, that opens the floodgates for all kinds of shenanigans and unethical conduct. Because how do you hold the business or fellow board members or executives accountable when they know that maybe you're not there on merit, or you're not there on the basis of what the skills and values and leadership you are bringing to the board. So it's very, very important for board members' ethical grounds to be clean. Keep your ethical nose clean if you're a board member, and model that and demonstrate that. Very, very important. And this varies according to, by different board or types of boards. And we need to see that. And founder boards, sometimes that's different. Major corporates, that's different. Multilateral agencies, their boards, that's very different. Nonprofits, that's different. I've had the privilege of working right across many of those. And it's very, very important to read the room carefully, especially if you're a board coach or advisor or consultant, and not try to be a consultant when you're supposed to be a coach. That becomes unethical. In you're doing this, but you're appointed for this, but you're doing something else. Again, ethics and values of the coach, the board coach.
And Arne, how would you confront unethical behaviour in board coaching?
Oh man, thanks for the easy question. Because the reason why it's challenging is you've got legal considerations, then you have ethical considerations, and you have values considerations. So it's quite a mix. So I usually, and for the publicly traded boards that I work with, it's usually a legal issue. It's not, the ethics, they know what's right, the difference between right and wrong, but they're driven by other considerations. Will the shares that are vesting to me be of value if this gets out on the, in public, if the media reports it? Ethics, we should make decisions right, but look at directors who are on, who serve on the boards of publicly traded tobacco companies. We know smoking kills, but they're still on there. You can bring to their attention, these are your values. I sense, because you've got to get permission and hopefully have a level of trust where you can bring up the issue with the board, and then you have to leave it to them because they just may say, "Thank you, Mr. Winokur, out you go." That is, it's a very, very difficult issue to navigate, and usually once there's an ethical issue, they're bringing in lawyers. They don't necessarily want a coach. I think all you can do generally at the beginning is frame and anchor the discussions in their values, their ethical considerations and the law, bring their attention to it, and then they run with it or not. And more often than not, I've been asked to leave the room just because they don't want anybody witnessing their discussions either, right? The in-camera sessions are really, really important as well. And those are sometimes where the real work happens with the board, and they don't want a coach there because one, they're legally they're exposed to risk because I could testify even though so it's fraught with difficulty. So again, sounding like a management consultant, it really depends. However, I would say be true to yourself. If you're finding that there's a multinational group, like let's say operating in Northern Alberta and completely destroying the ecosystem in order for profit, and you have challenge with that, don't take the job either. That's the other way. It's hard to agree and acknowledge that, yeah, I'm going to give up a really good, lucrative contract, but I don't know if I want to support these people because their behavior has been like this over the last 20 years. So.
Thanks. David, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just that one of the things that's fascinating is to actually help the board have an ethical decision-making framework. And we've occasionally adapted the framework we use within ethical mentoring as a 6-stage process, looking at ethical issues, and just getting the board to adopt that process. If it's a difficult issue, if it's got ethical overtones or undertones to it, here is the process for doing it. And if they don't want to know, it's not going to do any good. But where you've got people on the board who are genuinely concerned and want to be ethical and do a good job, and protect the reputation of the company and see their responsibilities, the environment, etc., using an ethical decision-making framework can make an enormous difference.
David, do you mind me just jumping in real quick? I think your point is really key. If the board members want, you can suggest it to them. And I find that so difficult sometimes where one has to acknowledge the fact that they're not interested. You want to, and I find that so heartbreaking because it's like, don't you see this? The impact, generations, your reputation. So I really appreciate that you bring up that there's a framework, and I'm going to be asking you if I can.
I'm happy to share it with anybody. Yeah, that
would be great.
Yeah, that's a brilliant one. I'm glad you came in there on that one. David, that's such an important part. What is the board open to? Can the board accept that and veto that and make sure that that's an acceptable one, that every board member signs a code of ethics for being on the board and how they do that? Very, very important that we look at types of board and then the terms of board membership. Sometimes some people are permanent board members for life, and others are maybe for 3-5 year term in that, depending on what kind of board it is. It's looking at transitions when people come on, how many things, for example, are approved before a board member exits or rolls off the board, and who comes in their place around that. If there are specific interest groups at board level championing certain interests for their own businesses or networks, then you're in trouble there as a board member if you're staying on the ethical side of things. So that speaks to values. And we're seeing this now, if we want to blow it up to companies that are operating in war zones or things like that. And if we don't want to go there now, but yeah.
Great. And we've got a question coming from the chat here. So I don't know whether you could answer this, Claire, or anybody on the panel. Can you recommend any books that address how to help a board with an ethical decision-making framework?
So I know one specifically for family businesses. What we'll do with those very few slides, we'll put other books on that we recommend, and we'll send that out to everyone along with David's framework as well. I'll make sure that happens.
Fantastic. Thanks, Claire. I'm conscious of time as well, even though we're pacing through these, which is great. But I wonder if you could share one of the most innovative tools or techniques that you've used in your practice to elevate engagement and harmonize maybe different perspectives among board members. That's to you, Claire.
Oh, that's Claire. Yeah. Go ahead, Claire. I'll come up.
Welcome as well to me. I'm thinking of a few things. Lego, definitely. And it needs a big sell for people who are not necessarily used to creative approaches and used to a sort of sat round a formal table. Things like the Gestalt empty chair, getting board members to physically or even online just shifting to move into a different energy, sitting in the chair of one of the stakeholders to uncover their perspectives. That's another thing there. And I've used things like image cards online or in person for them to connect with things like purpose and values. So everyone may choose one that represents how they feel the team is. That's another way of using them, as is and to be. And then they share together why they chose that specific card in terms of the way the team are operating. Systemic constellations as well, uncovering knowledge in the system. And I'll leave it to the others now.
Femi, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, two quick ones. I use cards. But with some boards, there are some cards from different team coaching tools that we use, and I think the Global Leadership Academy may have some cards that you may use for adapt for board work. And then the one that what I find very useful sometimes is asking them to what it would be like to rotate the chairs, and I've done this with a number of boards, and it's fascinating when they change chairs per item, someone else chair, runs the meeting based on, say, on the number of items, depending on what kind of agenda they have. If they let you in on that and you observe that, it's absolute fun to see how different people chair the meeting, the actual board meeting. Yeah.
Shall I go next, or do I?
Yes, please. Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, my favorite is the shadow board.
Oh.
So what we do is we take young, bright young people in their late 20s. So they've got some experience. They're not completely wet behind the ears, but they are, they've got a different perspective on everything that goes on in the organization. And if there are 8 people on the board, we have 8 people from below, and they meet a week before the real board meets, and they get the same papers, and a different member of the board each time chairs their meeting, and they discuss the same issues. And then when the real board meeting happens, one member each time of the shadow board comes up and actually sits in and observes. And we get to the point where the person who chaired the shadow board meeting says, "Well, it's interesting. The shadow board had a different perspective. Would you like to talk about this?" And so you've created this connectedness between the top and the bottom of the organization, and it's very, very powerful. I remember once when we did this, we were looking at the strategic plan, and the board all thought the board all thought they were united around this plan and how it was going to be rolled out further below. But the shadow board pointed out that it was actually going to be seen in very different ways, interpreted in totally different ways in different functions. But the board had no idea that would happen. It just thought it was off our desk. It's going to work, isn't it? So the learning that comes from this, you're creating for the young people, you're creating strategic awareness in them. You're giving them an insight into the kind of issues and the dilemmas that have to be dealt with at the top. But for the top, it's giving them an insight too into what's really happening and the thinking patterns further in the organization. It's just one of them of a number of techniques that we're finding. How do you create the linkage between the top and the board and where the work is really done?
Lovely. I've not heard of that before, so I'm learning something new today. Sounds immense. Absolutely genius idea. And Arne, do you have anything to add before we move on to the final question?
The one method that I like employing with boards is getting them to meet in a boardroom without a boardroom table, and also not allowing them to bring in their laptops or their phones, so that they and then just letting them get into the into the space. Usually it's a circle of chairs, maybe a few boards where they can write on, or a whiteboard, and most times the boards do not like that at all, because they identify their power and their position by where they are at the table, what kind of technology they can hide behind. Now they're fully exposed to one another. They're probably connecting in a way that they never have. And, and usually the conversation starts with, "So how are we all feeling about this change?" And it just starts a discussion. And it's also the cheapest method. And it's something that you can pull out at, if things change or you come in at the last minute. I find it, the conversations usually, and the other thing is to then hold the space for the discomfort as well. Help them grow comfortable with that discomfort, and then try to bring out connections between how they interact and how they're feeling now, and is there a way to improve that? The other thing that I find is it's outside of the board, but when, if you can, having a boardroom, like a board dinner, which allows them to get to know one another. Some boards like that as part of their offsite, but I also find that is very useful, because as many, as David and Claire and Dumi have hinted at, boards don't meet often. they don't get to know each other. And I think that's the other key. If when we're talking about connections, there's that personal connection. And one thing that we do is that we also then at each course, we ask people to change seats so that you're not safe with the person next to you. And usually we try to get a circular table as well, so that there's no edges, so that there's a bit of fluidity. So those are the two things that I use, and I find that that's it's been, I haven't got any negative, like intensely negative feedback from that afterwards.
Lovely.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, everybody's loving your shadow board idea, David, and Claire's even saying bring back beanbags, backs permitting. So thanks to everyone for staying with us. We're going to wrap up. We've got one last question, which I think we can whiz through. So I'll ask the board panel to be brief, but nevertheless still impactful. And to the audience, what changes do you think are on the horizon? How can today's and tomorrow's board coaches stay ahead of the curve? And to you panelists, what do you see is the biggest emerging trend which will shape the future of board coaching? Yeah, let's start with you, Demi.
Yeah. For me, one of the things to look at, I touched on earlier, is bringing in younger people. And Claire mentioned it. It's just having a little bit of diversity, or if you like, quite a bit of different representatives on the board, people that challenge each other, and then building, call it psychological safety across the board for people to challenge each other, to hold each other to account, and to be real with each other. We are seeing this with younger people that don't care for your experience and reputation and what you've done, and are more interested in what kind of human are you. So I'll end by saying that for me, I see ahead boards that are rehumanized, the topic we spoke about earlier, and that are in touch with what's going on in the world today.
Thanks, Demi. And David, what's your opinion on this? I'm
going to take diametrically. I mean, I love what Jimmy's saying, and I agree totally. But I'm going to look at the other extreme. I think the rise of AI may actually cause boards to become even more dehumanized by its focus on data. And we know that the more that people look at data and figure data, the less humane they become. We know that a lot of groupthink happen. The need for the board to come to a consensus on things. That consensus process, when you bring AI into it, as it's increasingly happened, it can create negative consensus, or consensus that's damaging. Put it that way. Stops you looking at the thing at what people don't know, the contrarian view. The way that the AI works, it finds a median view that comes out of lots of the data set, but it misses all the richness that's around the edge of it. So I think there's lots of areas in which the AI can be very helpful, and AI can in some ways be helpful to a board. But I also think that one of the institutions that is most in danger of being undermined by AI is the board.
Lovely. And Arne, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm going to look at, what I think boards can do to improve is start trying to but evolve the way of thinking that they have from this very linear reductionist view, and incorporate more of a systemic and complex adaptive way of thinking. That just because they have just because they plan something doesn't mean it'll happen. And I think what I'm really struggling with is trying to figure out a better term for systemic as well as complex adaptive systems. How do I communicate, that awareness to directors and boards that their way of thinking has to evolve? Because when I'm networking, and I say, I work with complex adaptive systems that just, their eyes glaze over and they start looking for someone else to talk to. But I think that's what we have to do, and to facilitate, or that's the emergence, and we have to facilitate that, because the faster we help them become aware that the world is very, very complex and dynamic, I think that will help boards perform better. And I think we'll also humanize them more a bit, as well, as they recognize the systems that they're operating in.
Thanks very much, Anne. And finally, Claire, what do you see shaping the future of board coaching?
So from the NGOs I've worked with, definitely there needs to be more accountability. And in other boards, I've noticed themes around sucking up power. So reducing that and listening to others in the organization, I feel is really important. And then also balancing head and heart, being more vulnerable, and, leaning in to support each other. Even reaching out beyond for support, interdependence, because so much more can be done in different sectors, especially when people are, yes, there's competition, and what's wrong with shaping the sector together in service of more people? Oh, you're on mute, Sarah.
I did a David there. So, I mean, that's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to open up the floor. So if you do have any questions that we haven't answered along the way, please pop it in the chat now. No question too large or small, so let's try and make it as interactive as possible. I think if we try and limit ourselves to 5 minutes, sorry. So yeah, fire away with your questions, please. Okay, I think we've got a question from Benita here. Do we know how to work with AI in service of societal considerations? David, since you brought up the subject of AI, I'm going to hand that one over to you.
No, we don't know. That's it. We don't know. I would love to have something sensible and wise to say about it, but we just don't know. It's too, there are too many imponderables.
I think we've got our topic for the next series anyway. It's definitely around AI and board coaching. Let's see what else is coming in. Oh, I like that, Andrew. What if the board becomes a team of team coaches? That's an interesting question.
Well, that would work with the Richard Hackman's original research, and I think it was Hackman's research that looked at board teams or boards and top teams, and found that coaching amongst themselves and to other people and being coached was an important factor in their performance.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody in the audience?
Don't be shy. We're here.
They love a good challenge as well. Come on, leave them on a high. Give them a challenging question.
Sarah, I was going to throw it back at Andrew. I think you may have some interesting things to say to that around. Andrew, what do you think of the team of teams, team of coaches, and the issue that you raised there in the chat, Andrew?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's, I think it's an interesting journey, to take the board if they were up for that. But yeah, I think there's a lot of work to go down that path, I think. Yeah, you have to have a completely different perspective. It's not about power then, is it? It's not about grabbing power or having an easy job.
Yeah,
It's completely
yeah,
different journey.
yeah. I think you're spot on that. It's understanding. I think Claire again touched on it, and David, and on the systemic nature of things, Sarah, around knowing the lay of the land and reading it correctly to be of service. It's connecting the dots, and David teaches us this in team coaching work we do around the understanding the systemic nature of what you're dealing with, and being able to read right across around corners is what's going on. And your topic around what's happening around, what's coming around the band in team coaching is exactly that. If you do your part in accountability, what Claire was talking about, you have a better chance of having a healthier board and organization into the future than when you're stuck in this is what I know and this is what works for me. Learning edge, staying on the learning edge.
That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic, Dummy. Thank you very, very much. And indeed, thank you to all our fantastic panelists, David, Dummy, Claire, and Arne, and our amazing audience for your contributions. We hope you're walking away with valuable insights into the dynamic world of board coaching. Don't forget to check out our recording if you want to relive any of the magic that you've experienced here today. We will be sending you the link to the Beckett McKinroy Consultancy YouTube channel. And also stay tuned for the next session. Obviously, this is the first in the board coaching series. So from all the chat going on today, the AI and board coaching, I think we've got a lot more to go after and discuss. So thank you very much. And until next time, keep leading with curiosity and courage. Thank you and goodbye.